Today what we're going to be working on is a fashion croquis at 10 heads tall, and this is going to be the static pose. The tools that you're going to need is going to be a clear ruler, as well as a number 2 pencil or an HB pencil. You're going to want to have a yellow, blue, and red color pencil, your white plastic eraser, as well as having a detail eraser, and of course a pencil sharpener. In order to complete this lesson, you're going to want to have already gone through the faces layout video, as well as the hands layout video. It's critical that you already know these because we're going to start using these layouts here on your croquis for the faces and hands, while we're also going to learn the figure itself. Make sure that you've already done your homework for learning how to measure the faces and coming up with the 3/8 here, the 3/4, half, 1/8, as well as practicing measuring going down for getting your heights for the 10 heads figure. So make sure you've already gone through this homework. Also, there was an introduction video before, and we had talked about finding the figure heights. You absolutely have to memorize these as a designer, as well as knowing the different widths. So how wide is her rib cage, her hip bones, full hip, shoulder. You need to know this by heart. So go ahead and, as we're going through these lessons, take the time to start memorizing these, however it takes for you to do that. In order to complete this video, you're going to want to go ahead and have already printed pages 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to do these together now. So sharpen your pencils and take out page 4. Have your ruler ready, as well as your color pencils. What we're going to do is, I'm going to break this down to where we're going to just focus on arms, and then we'll focus on legs, because this is going to be new for you. You've already drawn some faces and hands. Now, how do you draw her arms and legs? At the top of page 4 here, I'm going to be referencing your model's left arm and right arm. So I don't want you to get confused as we're going through the demo. So this model is facing towards us. So this hand here would be her left hand. So let's put an L here for left. And then this would be her right side. So put an R here. Now, as you recall, we're able to measure how tall your model is by using the heights of her head. So for instance, this is 1 head, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all the way down to 10 heads. We can also break this down to where the shoulders are at 1.5, armholes at 2, the bust is at 2.25, rib cage is at 3, etc. The same thing we can do here with her arms. So we can figure out how long her upper arm is, how long her forearm is, and how long her hand is, all based on the size of her head. So take a look right here. I already have it laid out for you. So the upper arm is 1.5 heads. So that's going to go from the shoulder down to her elbow joint. So come over here. Shoulder is 1.5 heads heading down. So remember here, shoulders is 1.5 heads. And what that's going to be is going from the word upper, go up to this line and go down to this line and add some arrowheads. So this is letting you know that the upper arm is 1.5 heads total. That's how tall it is. So if I took a measurement of this girl's head, it would be a full head, and then if I took a measurement of half of her head, it would be plus 1/2 to get a total 1.5 down. And where that starts is up here at the shoulder. The next one is going to be her forearm. You can see it's already written in here. Her forearm is 1 head. So for instance, whatever the size of her head is also the size of her forearm. Let's do the same thing here. So let's put a line going up and down. We'll add arrowheads. So now you know this is the distance for the forearm, this is the distance for the upper arm. Now some things that my students will get confused about is, well, there's a joint here, so there's also a little space. Is that correct? And the answer is yes. So what we can do to clarify that is come in here along her left arm, and I already have a circle provided for where that elbow joint is. And then there's this space here for that joint. So go ahead and do that in blue. Now the next one is going to be the hand. Her hand is 3/4 of a head. So again, this would be going from the top of her skull down to the tip of her nose. 3/4 of a head would equal the same distance as her hand. Once again, we have this wrist bone here, and there's going to be a little space between the forearm and the hand. So let's color in that wrist bone oval in blue, and we'll highlight this area in blue right here. So then we know when we go down to the hand, so now let's color in these 3 sections here using red and yellow. So for this upper arm, go ahead and shade in, that's the upper arm. And then down here at the hand, let's do this in red also. And then in between the two, we have yellow for her forearm. And then come in over here and we can circle forearm in yellow, upper arm in red, hand in red. So this will help you to remember the sections, and then it also includes a little more space for each of these 2 joints, the elbow joint and the wrist joint. Now let's move on to her right arm. What I want to do at this point is I want to start teaching you how to just actually draw the arm now that you know the measurements. To start off, let's go ahead and analyze what you can see here already. So for instance, this is the shoulder at 1.5 heads down. So over here, write 1.5. And the armhole, if you recall, is at 2 heads down. So over here at armhole, write the number 2. In between the shoulder and the armhole, we have this oval. And the oval is heading vertical and at an angle. What determines this angle of the oval is when we go from her little waist over here to her shoulders, we're following that direction. So it's making like a Y shape or a V shape. And you'll learn more about that later. But we can see here where this is her waist and shoulder. Here's that oval. And the oval should be evenly split, half and half on both sides. What I want you to do is, on the outside, I want you to color that in yellow. And on the inside, color that in red. And this is just to remind you that it's half and half. Now let's do the same thing out here. But let's pretend that we're finding that. So just for fun, go ahead and draw this curve right here. And then come over here and do something that's pretty similar to that. And for now, we're just guessing. It's okay if it's not totally perfect. And then what we'll do is, this is half of the oval on this side. This is the other half of the oval on this side. And I want you to also draw the oval so you start to get a sense of the size and shape of this oval at her armhole and shoulder. The next thing we're going to do is we want to find the center of that oval. So if you notice, I already have kind of a little dot on there, so just make that darker. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down and aim for the center of the elbow right here. But what else I want you to do is I want you to pretend that you're finding this location out in empty space. So if you come over here and you get your 1.5 heads measurement for the forearm, for the upper arm, come over here to the shoulder, measure down that distance, and then you'll see I already have like a little curve right here. So pretend that you just found that and go ahead and draw that in. And then look at the size of this elbow right here and come over here and do about the same thing. Let's color this in blue, color that in blue. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to go from the center of this armhole, and with a straight line you're pointing down to the middle of that elbow joint and draw a little arrowhead. So let's move along to the forearm. Now what we're going to do is below this elbow joint we want to do another curve, so then we know this is the beginning of the forearm traveling down to the wrist joint. So the next thing we would do is we would want to have that measurement. So for now, come over here and just find this forearm, which was 1 head, and you can come over here, pretend that you're measuring 1 head and finding this location here. So go ahead and color that in with pencil. And then below that would be her wrist joint. So if you remember, her wrist joint is an oval, so go ahead and put that in there now. If you want, you can draw on top of this one first, come over and do that one. And then let's color this in blue, blue. Then again, you're going to go from the center of the elbow joint towards the center of the wrist joint with a straight line and draw an arrowhead. The last thing we want to do is her hand is just relaxed and dropping down with gravity. So at this point you can see here her hand is basically just going almost straight down with the paper. So come on over here on your hand and starting from the center of the wrist, go ahead and just draw a line dropping down, add an arrowhead, and basically this will be the center of her hand. Now the next thing we know is the hand itself is 3/4 of a head. So let's go below the wrist joint. Then we want to take this measurement, 3/4 of a head, coming down. And this would be the fingertips of her hand. And then let's divide it up from what we already have learned doing the hands demo. So guesstimate what would be about halfway. Throw your arc in there. That would be arc A. Find the next halfway point again. This is arch B. This one is the fingertips, so that was C. And then eventually C comes back to touch B. So down here it's B and C, and this is arch A. This is the process that you would go through to start to establish your croquis as a beginner. So far, we've done everything except for drawing the actual arm in here. So let's go ahead and do that now. How I want you to learn how to draw this arm is we're going to start by just tracing off of this girl, and then we'll start to do it out here. So do this with me. Come over to her right arm, and you're going to notice that her upper arm here, basically these two lines are parallel. So they're not tapering in or tapering out, they're just following each other. So go ahead and get a sense of drawing. Here's the upper arm, which curves with the armhole and connects into the shoulder. And this is the other side of her upper arm, which will go all the way to her rib cage, and then this is a hidden view. So this is like a see-through view heading towards the outside edge of this armhole. So go ahead and do that now out here. So here we have the inside edge heading for that armhole. We have the outside edge and it's heading towards her shoulder. And then if it's easier for you to see it, let's go ahead and shade this in with pencil so we know that that was her forearm. Again, the important thing to remember about this is the forearm is pretty much just parallel lines. So let's take a look here at our own forearm. Now put your hand down so your hand is a profile view and your forearm is flat facing up towards you. So here's my elbow joint. And then you'll notice that the top edge is just this continuous curve and you have some muscle up in this area. And the bottom edge has a lot more muscle down in this area, which is helping your hands contract. So this one pops out quickly, and then it needs to cut back into this little wrist right away. So again, the top part of your arm curves out, comes down into the wrist. The lower part pops out faster and then has to come back faster into the wrist. So now you can see here, the top edge of her forearm is just this slight outside curve. But the inside has that muscle from your forearm going into a narrow wrist. So let's do that out here. So we have the top side, which is just a simple outside curve, and the underside has the muscle and turns into quickly a narrow wrist. And let's shade that in lightly with pencil. And if it helps for you to see this, you can come out to the side so it's curving out and scooping back in. Curving out, scooping back in. That's what this is doing here. And then to finish with our hand guide, so remember that this will start at the wrist. This is aiming out towards the fingertips, and this is that V shape. So here we have her right hand. This is that V shape coming out. So if you recall, here's the center of the hand. This side is a quarter of a hand this way. This side is a half a hand that way. Boom, boom. That's that V shape. And then let's lightly shade that in. So what you have here is, if you had drawn a 10 heads girl and now you're starting to develop her arm and hand, you have the correct measurements for her upper arm, forearm, hand, including distance for each joint, and then also knowing and understanding the armhole, and the placement of the armhole is in between the shoulders and at the bottom of the armhole. And the shoulders are at 1.5 heads down, the armhole is at 2 heads down. So again, 1.5 is shoulders, 2 is that armhole. Now let's do her left arm together. And basically we're going to do the same thing. It's really important that you do the same sequence of events. So you need to find certain things first before you move on to the next. So it's similar to algebra. If you do this in a different sequence, you're going to get the wrong answer. So the first thing we want to do is, we want to know is where's the top of the shoulder and where's the bottom of the armhole. So using your ruler, you can come out to here to find this is the bottom of the armhole. So this was 2. And then we already have top of the shoulder, but just for practice, go ahead and draw in here. That's the top of the shoulder. Now over here, what we can do is this shape of her waist coming up to the shoulder, we want to duplicate that over here. So for instance, just guess. This would be coming up, and that would be her waist there. And again, we're going to learn this later, exactly how to do it, but for now you're just guessing. Then we're going to split it half and half on both sides. So we need half of the oval on one side, and we need half of the oval on the other side. And let's go ahead and color this the opposite, so it's mirrored. So the outside is yellow, the inside is red. Always remembering that this is halfway this way, halfway that way, according to that seam from the body. The next thing we're going to do is we want to find the center of this armhole. And then we're eventually going to start aiming down towards her elbow joint. But we need to know the measurement. So if we were to come in, there's no head on this girl, but we can just use this right here. So if you remember, the upper arm goes from here to here. So there's your measurement. And we're going to start at the top of the shoulder. We're going to come down into this area. We're going to draw a line so we know the distance from here to here was 1.5 heads. And then we can have an elbow below that. So at this point, you can decide, okay, I want her arms to feel relaxed, so it's just dropping down with gravity to that elbow joint. If you want, you could draw a line first and then the elbow, or you can come in and decide where you want the elbow. In this instance, what we'll do is we'll decide if that's her waist here, I want the elbow a little bit off of her waist. Boom, right there. Let's color that in blue. And now let's aim from the middle of the armhole to the middle of the elbow. Put in an arrowhead. Now let's repeat. So we're going to do the forearm. The forearm is going to start below the elbow joint. And then we need the length of a forearm, which is 1 head. Now we can measure from this starting point below the elbow joint to 1 complete head, and that's where her forearm would stop. Now at this point we can decide, hey, I want her forearm to flow off of her body a little. So you can see here her upper arm dropped with gravity, her forearm is going off the body. So let's do the same thing here. This is going to flow off of the body. And where we ended up here, that will be the middle of our wrist. Color it in blue, add an arrowhead. The last one is going to be her hand. So this model, her hand, again, is just relaxing straight down with gravity. So starting from this wrist, we can just drop down with gravity, put an arrowhead on there. And this was the top part of her hand. Now we know the distance is going to be 3/4 of a head. So from here, we'll just get the measurement. If you had your croquis out, you'd be getting your measurement right there. So starting here, below the wrist, we want to come down to find the full length of her hand. And then following the hand guides, we want to split this in half. So we have arc A, split this in half again. This is arc B. And then we know arc C will come down and touch there at arc B. And then we can label these. So this was A, B, C, A, B, and C. So far we know the length of the upper arm, where the elbow joint is located, the length of the forearm, where the wrist joint is located, and the length of her hand, as well as starting to divide up her hand so it's easy to come back and draw. Now the last part is to flesh it out. So we want to have her forearm, which again is parallel. So it's going to be about the same width of this armhole heading down towards her joint. So let's start from this outside edge, This is going to curve up into her shoulder. The inside one is just following parallel with that. And again, this is like a see-through view, so it's going behind her body up to this side. And we can shade that in. So then for the forearm, the top part is just a smooth curve heading down towards her wrist. The inside has that muscle that pops out and then quickly comes back to a small wrist. And then her hand, you remember this is going to aim back towards her wrist bone, and it's going to V outwards. So it's a quarter of a hand here, Ving outwards, half of a hand there. And let's go ahead and shade in that area where you would draw the hand. Let's move on now to how to draw the legs. So taking a look here, what I've done is, this got very busy up here with the arms, but that's because I also wanted to show you and explain in depth. Down here at the legs, there's a little less information on here, but we're going to start putting that on here now. Again, we want to know which one is her left leg and right leg. So if you remember, this is your model facing towards you. This is her left. So over here would be L for left leg and R for right leg. Now on this one, let's start here on the left leg, and we'll start talking about getting your layouts, the placements for the bones, and then we'll start to flesh it out last. For me, it's a really important detail to know this cut on her swimsuit when I start to shape the legs. So what I want you to do is just lightly trace this off a couple times to get a feel for the curve, and then come over and do the same thing on the right side. The bottom of the swimsuit, for now, let's just do a straight line across. The next thing I want to do is, I want to find the center of this upper leg and the center of her lower leg before I start to draw the flesh to the outside of it. Now at first, you should be wondering, well, hey, the upper arm was 1.5 heads. What is this upper leg? We really don't need to know, because all you need to know is where the knees were located. So for instance, later on when we start drawing our complete girl, we're going to know where the full hip is at 4 heads down, the bottom of her swimsuit here at 4.25. And then you come all the way down to 6.5 for her knees. So we've already drawn in the full hip, bottom of the swimsuit. All we need to know is where are the knees. So coming down here, I already have a line provided. This is the knees. Again, this is at 6.5, so 6.5 heads down from the top of her head is her knees. Now what we're going to do is we're going to aim for this knee location. So looking at her pose, this is just a static pose. And what that means is her feet are evenly spaced and she has her weight equal on both feet. So if you can imagine a halfway point between her toes and coming up center to the middle of the bottom of her swimsuit, we can divide this in half. And that would be the plumb line. So just following straight up towards the swimsuit bottom, this would go all the way up to her throat, and this would also be the center of her face. Now what we're doing is the knees are a little bit spaced away from that plumb line. So come over here to her left knee and just draw the circle in. Come over here to her right knee, draw that circle in, and let's go ahead and shade these in blue. So now we know that eventually from her swimsuit and from her full hip measurement, we're eventually going to come down to this knee level. Up in here, I have this small curve right here at her swimsuit level. Go ahead and trace that off to get a feel for that curve. And then we're aiming down here for above the knee joints. So get this curve here and this curve here on the right. Now in this curve, what we want is a halfway point. So just guesstimate where that halfway point would be. And that's what's going to aim for the middle of the knee. So draw that down, put in an arrowhead. So now we know this is the center of the leg, and some of her flesh will go off to this side and off to that side. As well, you can imagine if you were drawing lingerie and you had some kind of nylons with a front seam, this would be the center of the seam. Or if you were doing like a garter belt, this is where the garter belt would come down and attach onto her like a thigh-high nylon or something. Now you should be wondering, why do I keep doing these curves going like this and finding the centers? Let's talk about that now so you can understand why I'm doing this. So flip your paper over to the back side. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw just a basic square or a rectangle. So draw a long rectangle. And then put a line below it, and then we'll do another rectangle below that. Now this line right here, we're going to call it the eye line. So go ahead and write on there, eye line. Now both of these rectangles at this point could be anything. It could be a magazine, it could be a piece of wood. But if I were to tell you that these were round cylinders, so these are a Coke can, so soda cans, you wouldn't quite believe me because you'd say, well, it's too square. How is that a Coke can? If your eye line was where my pencil is, a Coke can truly would just be a long rectangle. But as soon as you move your eye line downwards, you're going to start to see the bottom of the Coke can as an oval. The top of the Coke can would be just the upper half of this oval. So you'd follow that same curve, erase that old straight line, and now we have, you're seeing now it's a cylinder. This is a Coke can. Here's my eye line. I'm seeing the bottom of it. If you go to the one below it, now we're going to see the top. So this would be the top of the Coke can. The bottom would be just the half of the curve. Erase that old straight line. So now you can see the tops and the bottoms of the Coke can, making sure it's curved here, curved there. When you think about your arms and legs, they're all cylinders moving in all these different directions. Now what I'm doing here is this curve up here, so we're saying this is the top above your eye line, and this curve here is the bottom of your eye line. This is what I'm doing when I'm showing a cylinder for like a leg or something. What we can do is go ahead and find what would be the middle of your first curve, the middle of your second curve. Let's put a straight line through that. And then what I want you to do is I want you to make one of them wider and the other one narrow, so it's going to taper. So put a dot out here, equally spaced out there, and coming down, let's do something more narrow. Then I want to connect these. And basically now what you're doing is you're starting to draw arms and legs. So up here would be like, for instance, her knee joint. Down here would be her ankle joint. So just make sure yours are even on both sides. Even on both sides. It's wider here and it's more narrow there. You have a larger joint here and a smaller joint down here. So now you can see when we have this upper curve here and this lower curve here. And again, this one's curving upwards, this one's curving downwards. That's what we're starting to do here. So this is up here at the bottom of her swimsuit, down here above her knee, and then you're tapering down into that knee area. Let's go ahead and establish for the lower leg. So the first thing we want to do is we want to know where are we headed, because at some point this is just empty, clean paper. You don't know where you're going. So we're coming down to the floor level. This is the center of the plumb line. We want her ankles to be away from the plumb line because she has her feet apart. And basically at this point they're just dropping down with gravity. The next thing we want to do is we want to know the location for these joints down here. So for now, as a beginner, go ahead and just draw a line above the ankle and below the ankle. And we're going to label these. So if you remember from the croquis, you're starting to memorize all of these measurements. When you come down, there's an inside ankle at 9 heads down, outside ankle 9 1/4 down. So what we're looking at here is 9 is this first line, and 9.25 is the second line. And this is the inside ankle, outside ankle. Now from that, we can come over here and start to draw the ankle joint. Let's color that in blue. And then we know that the center from the knee to the center of the ankles is the center of the leg. So come here at the knee, down to the ankles. Draw on your arrowheads. And at this point, we can go back up to, this is below the knee here, below the knee here, and this is above the ankle down here, and above the ankle down here. And again, we're doing the same curves where the upper one is curving up and the lower one is curving down. Now the last one is when we come down for the foot itself, you can see the shape over here. So if you want, if it helps, let's trace this one off first. So we're just curving downwards. And then you're going to start narrow and you're going to go wide to the floor. So narrow to wider, and then you're hitting the floor. So go ahead and shade that in. And once you feel like you have that shape down pretty good, let's do it here. So curve down below the ankle joint, below 9.25. And then we're going to start narrow the width of her ankle, and we're going to angle down. And you can see, tracing over this, her shoe and foot fit right inside of there. And let's shade these in. So see how everything fit inside of there. To get used to drawing a shoe, go ahead and let's just trace this off right here and right here. So you're starting to kind of get used to what it's going to be like when you're drawing a shoe. And then know that also later I'm going to show you a little more detail on that. Now at this point, we're going to start fleshing it out. So we want to add the outside skin from her legs. There's a technique that I want to teach you because similar to the forearm, where the underside of the forearm had a very strong curve going outwards and back into the wrist, and the top edge of the forearm was smooth, is very similar to how we're going to draw the legs. So there's going to be one kind of a shape for the outside of her leg and a different kind of a shape for the inside of her leg. Take out your blue and red color pencils, and over here you'll see there's a heart shape. This one here we're calling the plain heart. Go ahead and trace this off. So a heart scoops out and it comes back down with kind of a straight edge coming back down to the bottom point. And trace it off this way. Now you'll notice what's happening is, with your pencil, let's go ahead and split this heart down the middle. And you'll notice there's this angling heading upwards like this, and there's an angling heading upwards like that. And this is very similar to what's happening here on the outside of her leg. So there's this angle popping up and then smoothed back to the knee. And then you see it even more in the calf area. So if I come over here to the model, you can see that this calf is popping out quickly and then it's smooth coming back into her ankle. So what we'll do is to remember that this outside edge is the plain heart shape. Take your red color pencil and come up here to the line that I've already provided, and let's draw right on top of that. So get used to this exact shape here. Then move over to the drawing itself, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw this shape here, which is the same as that, and then we're doing it again here on her calf. So that's the plain heart shape. Now remember, we threw these arrows in here to remind us that it's popping out first and then smooth coming back in. And you can see over here we have some arrows on these calves. Basically what it is this knee level was 6.5. Down here at the bottom of this arrow, connect these with a line and write in here 7.5. So down here at 7.5 heads down, we're doing these angles heading up and away. So you can come over here and just guesstimate where's that 7.5. Draw in your arrow, and it's going up and away. Now in between these two red lines, I want you to do a few more practice ones. So you get a feel of what the outside calf is doing. And then come up here to the thigh, And we're going to do the same thing. Just follow these lines so you get a feel for that curve. Oops. If you make one of them really bad, go ahead and erase it so this looks really clean. And you're training your brain. This is what that curve feels like. Now let's take a look at the inside. So this is going to be similar to your forearm. If you remember back up here at the forearm, it's curving out a little bit and cutting in. So it's almost doing like an S shape. Here we did a couple practice ones. So the same thing is going on here with her thigh. So if we look at the drawing, it's going to pop out quickly up here, and then it's going to start to carve in down here. So it's making like an S shape. It'll do the same thing down here at the calf. It'll come down and curve in at the ankles. So for this one, we're calling it the sweetheart shape. So if you compare the two different hearts, the plain heart was just a straight edge coming back to center. The sweetheart is doing this secondary curve right here. So go ahead and draw that with your blue color pencil to get a feel for this sweetheart shape. So it's doing that secondary curve inside of there. And then move over here, so this would be the inside of her thigh. And we're getting this sweetheart shape. So go ahead and draw on the first one provided, as well as the one that's already here on the girl. And then come down to the calf area. So again, it's doing this shape here. And we're doing it again here. And then taking your regular pencil, I want you to do some practice ones in between, just like this. And up here at the thigh. Again, if any of yours got really off, go ahead and erase them and fix them again. And the whole idea is that you're repeating these over and over, so it's drilling into your brain those curves. Come over here to your model's right leg, and let's go ahead and sharpen our red and blue color pencils. So again, we're going to draw with red following the plain heart shape right here onto the model. So follow her skin exactly. So you're going out, down, and back to the knee. You're also noticing the distance back to center. So let's color this in. So here you can see that was the center. You're wider at the top and more narrow at the bottom, so it's tapering down. And it has this outside plain heart shape, and it peaks up high. And do the same thing now down at the calf. So here we need to draw our arrow in. So down at 7.5, here's your arrow to remind us this is going to pop out up high. And then start your curve heading down towards the ankle. And then let's shade this in, going back to the halfway mark. Now, coming over to the back of your paper, what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the shaping here. So far all we have is we have a joint up above, down below. This is tapering, and it's even on both sides. What we need to know at this point is, well, what are we drawing? So first of all, this is going to be your knee. Down here is her ankle. And then what we're drawing here, this whole thing is going to be her lower leg. One other thing that you need to know is, well, which one? So the one that we're currently working on here is her right leg. So let's go over to the top here and let's label this for her right leg. So far we did that plain outside heart shape. What we need to know is where the calf is popping out. So if you recall here, her calf, there's a little arrow there to show it's popping out, and that was 6.5 is the knee, 7.5 was the beginning of that. So at this point we'll just guesstimate, you know, coming down about this area is 7.5. So go ahead and just draw a light line carrying outwards. And what we could do is we can start here. So that's the outside of the plain heart shape, and you're going to cut back in towards the knee. And when you do this, I want you to erase the lines, but keep that dot on there. So this is the calf going, or this is the outside edge of her leg. And then coming down into here, we're just doing that simple plain heart shape. Again, right here, it's just a simple plain heart shape coming back into the ankle. So we'll keep the exact same ankle location that you already have. You're just doing this plain heart shape. And this is the beginnings of starting to make this her right leg. Now what we want to do is we want to work on the inside shaping here using the sweetheart technique. What we're going to do is, this is that sweetheart shape, so it pops out, but it also carves back inwards. And that's what's going on here. Now for me, like I said before, I like to draw in the swimsuit first, so then I can see where I'm going to start the inside of her thigh. And just like the sweetheart shaping here, it's going to pop out quickly and then start cutting back inwards. Then you'll see as it cuts back inwards, we're starting to carve back into this. So go ahead and carefully trace that off and get a sense of the shape. And then let's color this in with blue. Now let's move down to the calf area. In the calf area, it's going to be a little more distinct, this cutting in shape here. And you'll notice right now, so we have a pretty even space on both sides from the center of the leg. But as we move down into the ankle, you can see that the inside shape cuts in really close to the center here. So if you want, you can start here to get a sense of how close it is, and then that calf muscle pops back out. So it's this shape here. And then shade in the blue, going only back to the halfway point. So again, what makes this a lower leg is how it's getting really thin here on the inside calf shape. And then this is the inside upper leg, which is it's cutting inwards and then scooping back, and it'll aim right here for her swimsuit. So go ahead and also let's color this in blue so you know that that is what you're aiming for. Now come back over to this side and we'll take a closer look on how to do it here. So again, this is going to be her right leg. We've already drawn the outside edge for her lower leg. And now we're going to draw the inside calf and this little corner right here. So what we're going to do is the ankle here is going to be a little bit smaller on this side. Very similar to what we did up here. We trimmed away some, away from the dot. Again, we're trimming inwards from the dot here. And this curve is going to curve inwards as it starts to come back out. Up at the top here, what I would do is the same distance that I did here, I would just duplicate that and we would have our upper calf. So now we have this inside of her right leg. So go ahead and erase this outside edge, but keep that dot right there. So now there's two dots. And then let's erase these edges here and also keep that dot as well. So we can see it's evenly spaced on both sides up here, but it's unevenly spaced down at the bottom. And when you look at your girl, the exact same thing is happening here. So it's evenly spaced at the top, unevenly spaced at the bottom. Let's go ahead and do the same thing now for her left leg. Now just to get a little more practice on this leg to the outside here, go ahead and find the middle of the thigh, come down to the middle of the kneecap, and then again we'll do the middle of the knee down to the middle of the ankle. And then here we have our inside sweetheart shape, inside sweetheart shape. And then for me, since I'm right-handed, I actually like to do my outside sweetheart shapes like this. And then this, we should have done this arrow first, and also I like to have this swimsuit drawn in first. So I would draw that in first, do this second, get my arrow, and then get that outside calf. And go ahead and practice just scooping these, drawing in the knee, getting this one at the top, getting these at the bottom, at the top, at the bottom, and the sides of the ankle. So make sure you've drawn with pencil over the whole thing here. And then if there's anything that we forgot over here, you can go ahead and get that now. So get this bottom shape here, the size of her knee, the upper shape here, the bottom shape there, ankles, let's get her foot. And the whole purpose of doing this exercise as well as this exercise is you're drilling into your head this shaping. So getting all of the shaping is really important. This is what helps distinguish when it's her right leg versus her left leg. Just like here, this would be her right leg and this would be her lower leg. Now that you've completed this assignment, I want you to scan this page as part of your homework for page 4. And then be sure to also scan this side, so this is your notes from doing the video. For the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the complete static pose figure. So we're going to have page 5, we're going to work on this girl. We're going to go ahead and analyze this one more time, similar to what we did here. And then the next page is we're going to start drawing one of our own totally from scratch.